friends, I'm so excited to see you this week. If you can see behind me, this week we are at the Thompson Woods Preserve's Wetlands. I can hear and see all kinds of animal friends and plant friends that I'm going to share with you. And so we're going to walk through the wetlands and talk about some different things. And then I'm going to talk about our vocab words for the week. And we're going to do a really cool craft of one of my favorite animals. Now, if you remember last week, I told you that my favorite cycle was the frog's life cycle. So if we're lucky while we're out here today, maybe we'll see a frog. All right, so let's start exploring and see what we can find. Well, friends, you may have noticed that some of Virtual Camp was filmed inside this week, which isn't something I like to do, but unfortunately we had to have a big tree cut down in our yard because it had a big hole in the middle of it. And as much as I hate to have trees cut down, especially when they're like this one is probably at least 100 years old, sometimes it's safer because it could fall on the house. So because of that, there's a lot of noise outside today in my yard, and so I had to film some of Virtual Camp with Kate inside the house. Last week when we were talking about cycles, one of the activities you could do is draw your favorite cycle in your journal. So I drew the frog life cycle. You can see it starts out as a frog who lays eggs in the water in a clump. The eggs hatch into tadpoles that swim around in the water until they get bigger and start to grow legs and lose their tail and turn into a frog again. I'm hoping that when we're down in the wetlands today, we'll have a chance to see some frogs. Okay, so I wanted to talk about our vocab words for the week. So the first one is wetlands. And wetlands are areas where there's standing water on the soil. So when we're exploring the wetlands, you'll see different spots where water has collected. And usually wetlands are at the bottom of like a valley. And so when it rains, the water all goes down into the wetlands. And the wetlands help absorb that water so that it doesn't make everywhere else get flooded. So there are 4 kinds of wetlands. There's a marsh, a bog, a swamp, and a fen. So if you go to Millbrook Marsh, you can see a marsh and also a fen. Marsh has more water on it than a fen. A fen is kind of like a trickle of water that comes up from underneath the ground. A bog is filled with water, and sometimes it's kind of stinky because it has something called peat moss in it that people often harvest and use in their gardens. And then a swamp is filled with a lot of water, and it usually has really big trees. And you can find both a bog and a swamp if you live near us in State College in Black Moshannon State Park. Now, wetlands are really important because they act like a sponge. And so they soak up water and they also clean that water. So it's important that we have wetlands and that we don't cover them up, because even though they're nice and flat and they can make a good place to put houses and things like that, it's important that we keep them because otherwise the water doesn't have anywhere to go when it rains. The wetlands are like a sponge. So if you think about a sponge in your house, it has 2 main purposes, 2 main things that it does. The first is that it cleans, and the second is that you use it to soak things up. So if we think of this bowl as the areas around a wetland, and if you notice, so if the sponge is the wetland, it's soaking up that water. See that? So the water also runs down. So if you look at the bowl, if I put water around the edges, it runs down the edges. So in the wetlands are usually at the bottom of the surrounding area, and when it rains, the water will run down the sides just like it does this bowl and go into the wetlands, which then soak it up and help keep the ground nice and dry so that particularly for us with our houses, it's nice because it keeps our yards dry and helps to make us not have to squish in mud all the time. The wetlands also clean. So like a sponge cleans, when it soaks up the water, the plants that are in the wetlands filter that water and make it nice and clean before it goes back into the water table that we drink. So when people take wetlands and make them into neighborhoods and things like that, because it's nice flat land, it can sometimes cause problems with what's called runoff. Because if there aren't plants to soak it up like this sponge, then the water is just going to run and it has nowhere to go, and it causes yards and areas around it to get really wet. If you think about somewhere that had a hurricane, like down in Texas, they had a hurricane a few years ago, and they've paved a lot of the wetlands over, and the water didn't have anywhere to go. And so it pooled and it turned in people's yards into mud, and sometimes it flooded their houses to the second floor because the water didn't have anywhere to go. So the wetlands are really important for us because they help soak up water and clean the water that we drink. The second vocab word on your sheet is amphibian. I'm hoping when we're out exploring, we're going to see some amphibians. So amphibians include things like frogs and toads and newts and salamanders. Now, the cool thing about amphibians is their name means 2 lives. 2 lives. And this is because all amphibians start their life in the water. So their mom lays eggs in the water and they hatch, usually into some sort of larva like a tadpole. And they'll swim around in the water and they get bigger. They eat all sorts of algae and things in the water, and they grow and grow, and then they grow legs and lose their tails. And then they can climb out of the water as a frog or a toad or a newt, and they live on the land as a grown-up, but usually still near water. They like to be close to the water. So in that way, it can be said that amphibians have 2 lives. The third vocabulary word for this week is the word shed. Now, when you see the word shed, you might think of something that's in your backyard where you store your lawnmower, which is one definition of that word. But another thing that if you're a scientist, you might talk about a shed is when a snake sheds its skin. So snakes shed their skin from the tip of their nose to the tip of their tail, all in one piece, just like if you take off a sock, and it turns inside out as they take it off. Now, snakes are not the only animals that shed their skin. Other reptiles also shed it, although lizards and things like that will shed it in pieces instead of as one giant piece. And frogs will even sometimes shed their skin. Most of the time, these animals are shedding their skin as they're growing so that they can fit in their new skin and have a nice shiny new skin, kind of like when you take a bath and you feel all clean. That's what snakes are doing when they shed their skin. I wanted to show you some things from my nature treasure box that you could probably find in the wetlands. So the first is a snake shed. Snakes shed their skin. So this isn't even the full shed. This is just a piece. The head and the tail have gotten lost over time, but snakes shed their skin as a way to clean themselves and also when they're growing. So as a snake grows, it outgrows its skin, and it will shed its skin from its head down to its tail in one piece, inside out. So tonight when you're taking off your socks, try taking it off from your toes to your heel, inside out. And that's what a snake does when it sheds its skin. This is a non-venomous snake because of the way that the belly scales are. You can see they're in a nice line, they're stacked. So that means it's a non-venomous snake. And you can see the scales on its back. So this is where its scales are. If you ever have a chance to feel a snake skin, give it a chance. Be nice and brave, because they kind of feel, to me, a little bit like bubble wrap. Some people think they're slimy. They're not slimy in my opinion. They feel more dry and kind of, like I said, like bubble wrap, if you've ever popped bubble wrap. The other treasure I wanted to show you, this one is super cool. If you can look at it with your magnifying glass. So this is a dragonfly nymph shell. So what happens is dragonflies lay their eggs in ponds, and when the babies grow to be about this size, they attach to a leaf or a stick, kind of upside down like this. And then when they're fully grown and they get their wings, they hatch. You can see the little hole where this one hatched out of. And then they're a full-grown dragonfly and they fly away. Isn't it cool that the legs and everything make a shell? And the eyes, you can see where those were. So I got this from a pond that I had, and it was stuck to one of the sticks. And so I saved it because I thought it was really cool. So when you're exploring the wetlands, you can look for live adult dragonflies. You can look for dragonfly shells. It's hard to see the dragonfly babies, but if you're lucky, you can see them swimming around in the water too. I unfortunately do not have a wetland in my backyard, so I put together some things to put in my backpack to take with me while I go on a walk down to the wetlands at the Thompson Wood Preserve. So you can see I have my water bottle, I have a snack, I grab my binoculars and a magnifying glass just in case I see anything cool on the way. All right, let's go. All right, so on a rainy day, I thought I would bring you to my favorite marsh, Millbrook Marsh, which, oh, and there's some marsh animals all over. If you can see, there's a rabbit coming up the path right at us. I was hoping we would see some animals that live on the marsh. There's also some red-winged blackbirds flying around in the grass. So I was gonna walk through, we're not even out on the marsh yet, walk through this field and show you some of the things that happen on a marsh during a nice rainstorm. So we're walking through the field part that isn't the marsh. You can see lots of grass and tall trees. There's some milkweed over here, which we'll talk about more when we talk about insects in a few weeks. And you can see all this grass is really tall as we head to the marsh. The ground isn't too squishy yet. There's some grass growing here. We might come upon some mud, but for the most part, the ground is pretty dry even though it's raining. And we have the marsh to thank for that. Remember, I said the marsh is like a sponge. It soaks up water and it cleans the water. So even though it's been raining for a lot of the afternoon today, the ground near the marsh is dry because the marsh is soaking up all the water. And we're headed to the boardwalk, which you might remember Miss Carolyn was talking about. And the boardwalk is here to make it so that we don't step on the squishy part of the marsh and ruin it. I don't know if you can hear all the birds. I'm just heading over to a spot where we can see what it looks like on the marsh on a rainy day. So now we are actually out on the marsh, and you can see the plants are a little different. There's still some trees because we're not out in the deep part of the marsh yet, but we have a lot of dogwood and plants around us that really like water because they have to live near the water. And here we go. You can see some days when there's no rain, this isn't as big as it is right now. The water even goes into the plants because there's so much of it. So you can see here, the grass has some water around it because it was raining today. So the marsh is doing its job, filling up, and then it'll soak up that water so that it doesn't get into the ground all around us. And you can see, like I was talking about, the marsh looks different than the field did. There's cattails out there, and there's one big willow tree because willow trees like the water. I'm gonna walk quietly for a little bit and see if we can see any animals come by us. Just wanted to make sure you can get a good look at what the marsh looks like, especially because it's so rainy today. Some other water-loving plants are these ones right here. You can see some snails on it. This is called Skunk Cabbage because it smells like a skunk. And these are in their fall, no, I'm sorry, not fall, they're later summer colors right now. They were bright green earlier in the spring, but they're starting to die off so some of these other plants can grow now. And another one I wanted to point out is right over here, and it's called Joe Pye weed. It's about to bloom, and it's a plant that butterflies really love. It looks similar to milkweed, doesn't it? So anyway, make sure that sometime you come to the marsh in the rain. You can wear your raincoats and your rain boots and check out a marsh and see it in action, doing its job, soaking up water and cleaning that water for all of us. So when we went to Millbrook Marsh, we were at a natural wetland, or a wetland that was made by nature. This one here is made by man. And you can see this concrete here with boards to adjust for rising and falling water levels. And it helps to keep the surrounding neighborhoods safe. So the water, I'm going to climb up on it, the water can flow the way it's supposed to, but if we get a lot of rain and it fills up, they can move these boards and the water will flow into where all these nice plants are. If you remember, we talked about how if there's concrete or rocks or something like that that doesn't have plants, it's harder for the water to get soaked up. So in this case, the water will flow right into the plants and it will help soak it up and help it from flooding some of the neighborhoods around here. So here we are in the wetlands at Thompson's Woods. You can see there's some cattails in the distance, and these weird looking tubes that you see are spots where people have planted native plants that they're hoping will grow. So native compared to invasive plants, native plants are plants that have been here since the forests first came to be. So they've always been here in the United States and Pennsylvania, and they're plants that the animals that live here recognize and get good nutrition from. Invasive plants, such as things like garlic mustard and Dame's rocket, and about 1 million other plants that are around sometimes, it feels like. Those plants are introduced usually by humans, and they haven't been here for a very long time. And so usually the animals that live here don't recognize them as either food, or if they do recognize them as food, they don't get enough nutrition from them. So nutrition means when you eat your dinner and your mommy or daddy or your grandparent or whoever's eating dinner with you says, eat all your vegetables, they're trying to make sure that you get enough good stuff so that you can grow big and strong. Well, animals have to do the same thing. And sometimes when they're eating invasive things like honeysuckle, the berries taste really good. They taste like M&Ms. But could you eat only M&Ms for the rest of your life and be healthy? No, right? There's too much sugar and things like that in them. So birds have to eat a variety of food. Birds, for example, have to eat a variety of food. And if they eat native plants, they're getting all of the nutrition that they need to be healthy. So people come along and they plant different things. Like that says that it's a sycamore. And this one says that it's a nanny berry. And this one over here said, if I'm not mistaken, oh, that one wasn't labeled. Maybe it was that one over there that said elderberry. So these are different kind of plants that are healthier for the animals, and they're native to our forests. So they also grow, there's an elderberry. They grow really well here because this is where they are supposed to grow. So a lot of times people will come along and clear out the invasives and plant natives to help the animals get better food sources. So that's what you see going on in these wetlands right here. I'm inside a little structure that looks like a house. It's called a bird blind. And if you're in here and you're nice and quiet, you can look out and sometimes birds will come up nice and close. You also get a good view of the cattails, a common plant found in the wetlands. If you're out exploring, you might see something like this in the area where you are. This is a weather station. So it's collecting weather data and sending it back to scientists who can then share what the temperature and the wind and the sun and the clouds and everything that's going on with people. So you might want to look up what your local weather station is and see if you can find out information about some place near you. If you remember, we talked about water flowing downhill. Most wetlands are at the bottom of what looks like a basin or a bowl. And so here you can see where water has dug out a trench to get down to the stream. And it does that when it flows, and it makes this trench. And so if you think about it, what's above us here is uphill. And so the water is flowing downhill, making this trench and going to the stream, into the wetlands. So if you remember, I said that water flows downhill. So there's the spot where we were, and we're up on top of a hill now, and you can see the wetlands are below us. So remember, the water is going to flow down from all these hills around me into the wetlands. And it's important that those wetlands have plants to help soak up the water, to keep it from getting into the ground and making the ground all soggy. So if you notice, the wetlands are below everything around us. Here's another way to show you another example of how high we are when we leave the wetlands. The wetlands are down there, down this path. You have to climb down to get to them because the water wants to flow downhill. I wanted to show you a few trees that grow in the wetlands because these are trees that like to have their feet wet. So they grow in the wetlands where the water is close to their roots. So the first one here is a black walnut tree. There's two of them there. And then behind the two black walnuts, there's a fluffy looking tree called a willow tree. You'll see a lot of willow trees in the wetlands because they like to be where there's water. And if you have a wet spot in your yard, a willow tree is the perfect tree to plant because it will soak up all the water and make your yard nice and dry. Friends, if you listen, that is a cicada. That means that summer is here. See if we hear it again. All I hear now is the sound of the weed whacker going in the distance. All right, so we learned about the frog life cycle last week, and then in the wetlands we were looking for frogs. So I want to make this frog origami with you that actually jumps. He's pretty cool. If you got the WPSU backpack, you have 2 sheets of green origami in there that you can use, origami paper. If you did not get the Penn State WPSU backpack, you can cut a piece of green paper or any color paper. There's no reason you couldn't have a pink frog or a red frog. And you just need to cut about a 6-inch square of paper in order to do this activity. And I'm going to walk you through the steps. You can also find the instructions on your sheet for week 3 in your backpack. So week 3, the instruction sheet, and you can figure out how to make this origami frog. So let's try to go ahead and make one. So the first step is you're going to fold your paper 2 times, once like a hot dog, and then fold the hot dog in half so that you end up with a square. Then you're going to open it up because you need these lines to guide you for the next step. So then you're going to fold the bottom corners and the top corners to make a diamond shape. The easiest way to do it is to take the corner and line it up with those folds that you made, and then crease the end. And if you notice, we have a square that you can kind of open up. Next, you are going to hold it like a diamond, so make sure you have a point at the top and a point at the bottom. And you fold over 2 small triangles. It almost makes kind of an upside down ice cream cone shape. Or a kite. So you can see I folded these both over. And then you're going to fold up your bottom triangle so that its edges line up with the 2 triangles that you folded over. So if you notice, I folded that up and I'm creasing everything nicely because that's the best way to make origami. Now, you're going to take your triangle and you're going to fold in the corners. This part's a little tricky because it's kind of thick, but you want to fold it in to make little triangles, and you want to line up the bottoms and the corners with the middle. You'll do that again on the other side. So you're folding them in, the bottom 2 corners, and you're making them meet in the middle. Then you fold up the bottom of your triangle. You want to fold it up maybe about 1 inch. This is going to make your jumping frog legs. And then you fold the top half back over. So it looks like this. You fold over the nose, however much nose you want, and you have your jumping frog. Now you can see I decorated my one. I could have made it a lot cooler if you want. If you have colored pencils or markers, you can color it in and decorate it, draw eyes and a nose, and then you can have frog races and see which one goes the furthest. Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed our exploration of the wetlands this week with Virtual Camp. Let's see, what did we do? We went to Millbrook Marsh during a rainy day to watch the marsh in action. We went to the wetlands near where I live and talked about how water flows downhill. And we learned some new vocabulary words. Oh, and my favorite thing, how to make a cool hopping origami frog. I hope that you have a good week, and next week, I'm so excited. We're going on an adventure to a real working farm to learn how people grow our food. So tune in next week at 6 p.m. on Thursday, and we'll see you then. Goodbye. Thank you for being such great explorers with me. Just wanted to remind you that when you're in the woods, take nothing but pictures and leave nothing but footprints. So if you see something really cool, you can look at it with your magnifying glass. If it's safe and a grown-up says it's okay, you can pick it up and look at it more closely. But make sure you put it back so that the woods stay exactly as they are. Bye, friends.